whole healthcare industry is going to change dramatically in the next couple of years.
To chronic disease management and the preventative aspect of care.
AI can now understand the key clinical concepts of what's being verbalized in healthcare.
Welcome to Leaders in Healthcare. I'm Dr. Jordan Vollrath, physician, entrepreneur, and chief medical officer for Cherry Health. We're talking about all things healthcare. Join us as we speak to innovators, industry leaders, and the people working to drive the healthcare system forward. All right, today we're talking to Davy Wittock, Chief Business Officer for Influx Technologies. Davy is a healthcare technology expert and the driving force behind business development at Influx, where he spearheads initiatives that bridge decentralized solutions with customer needs in emerging industries. With a dynamic background in systems performance analysis, healthcare IT architecture, and enterprise solutions, Davy brings a unique blend of technical insight and strategic vision to the Flux team. Davy has worked almost 20 years as a radiology IT professional, going from radiology information systems to PACS systems to independent archive systems, and has worked for AGFA, Visage, and Sectra products. Today we're talking about AI, technology, and the path forward. Davy, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
That was a mouthful. Holy smokes.
It was. I always love the ones where there's like acronyms in there. Those are always fun to try and get off all in a row without messing it up.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was ECFA and Visage. Yeah. Chief Business Officer for Influx. Been doing that now for at least 2.5 years. And like you said, been in the medical space for about 2 decades now. So a lot of fun.
It's a space near and dear to my heart as well, as just a lifelong computer nerd and also obviously being a physician in the healthcare world. It's sort of an exciting intersection of technology and health, eh?
Absolutely. And then in my case, I even include blockchain of all things into it as well. So it's a lot of fun.
What's your Bitcoin position right now?
It's pretty good, actually. I can't complain. And I got a ticker over there that constantly shows me the current price. And for those wondering, we're at the all-time high at the moment. So that if you wonder when it was recorded. So yeah, we're doing well.
The markets are ripping as of mid-November right now. But tell me a little bit more about sort of like the AI and the computer systems that power our world. So a bit more about Influx. I understand you guys are really working on bringing down the price of compute power. And so on the one hand, we keep making these technological advancements. Transistors are getting smaller. Computes per second continue to go up. But then at some point, we're just faced with the realities of how much does electricity cost? And that I can only imagine becomes more and more of an exponential problem.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's a couple of issues that we're faced with, right? So the growing needs of compute and research and AI research and AI, generative AI, so everyday usage of AI, the demand is going up exponentially at the moment. And so that's a good thing. But at the same time, that brings some interesting issues as well, right? There's cost, the demand itself and what we have available currently today. And we actually surpassed back in early 2024, we kind of surpassed what we have available for compute power in data centers, and the demand surpassed it. And there's no way we're going to catch up anytime soon. Add in that the cost of all of these compute needs, and it becomes a very expensive endeavor. We can use ChatGPT for free, but we don't really realize that the cost behind it and the demand that there's there. So that's why sometimes we see sluggishness of the bot not responding fast enough, or even errors just because the demand is just too high. So with Influx, we started on an endeavor to make that more affordable and to find a different way of providing that compute power. And the compute power is literally provided by folks like yourself and myself, all the way up to regular data centers that are close by in the city, all the way to the big boys themselves that provide compute power decentralized. The decentralization part is what really drives me forward, and why I find that important is that it basically doesn't offer us a single point of failure. We've seen that a few times in the past where centralized entities have issues with patching or just straight up downtimes, and then all of a sudden we're all down. And we've seen that this year in 2024 with one unfortunate patch event that happened on a Friday evening. I don't know who the IT guy was there, but as far as my go-to at IT comes to is that you never do a patch on a Friday evening, ever. That's a golden rule in IT. Apparently they didn't follow it, and with all consequences, of course, afterwards. I was actually traveling during that period. I was in Europe. I got stranded in Europe because of that. Of course, there's worse places to be stuck. There's that. But yeah, patching and all of these things that go wrong, it becomes a single point of failure. So decentralization at heart is key for us. So with that, and then toss in some blockchain to help manage everything, and all of a sudden things become a lot more affordable and a lot more robust. And the providers, they get paid by the blockchain in our case, and then it goes all the way to those consuming it. They basically have a lot less cost when it comes to utilizing the software. And then because we're pioneers, we're cypherpunks at heart, we like to find new ways of tackling issues that are out there. And we're not in the business in the crypto space that with the funny monkey pictures and all that. No, we're here to make a solid case on how we can help progress, in this case, healthcare. And with my background of healthcare, knowing the intricacies of healthcare, knowing the pieces like HIPAA and all that, to make sure that it's private, secure, and making sure, of course, that it's operational 24/7. Those are the pieces that really drive my business sense. And also, I push that forward to the guys themselves. And then tie that with their innovativeness, we really make a difference in that space now. Fast forward to now with AI, we see that demand, and we hear the demand. We feel the demand as well, because we get on the daily, we get requests in for more and more compute. And so what I've done with my team is that we went to a ton of data centers, a ton of providers out there. We brought them all together in our product called Flux Edge. And we are able now to provide compute power for a lot less than your traditional providers out there. I'm not going to name anybody, but I know the cost of some of the bigger cards out there, the traditional cards that people utilize for research. We bring that cost down to a third of that price. And that's a big difference. If you have to work with research folks, a lot of them work with grants, and they're living from grant to grant. And if the grant is literally consumed by all that GPU compute, it affects the research altogether. So if we can bring it down to a third of that price, either we can give them more time to work, or we can give them even more compute so they can even work faster. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we've been trying to accomplish so far.
And can you give us a bit of context, like for an average person, to put it into perspective, like what does compute power actually cost? Like if I were to just go run a simple Google search versus putting something through Gemini, what are we looking at in terms of cents? And then how does that extrapolate out to a bigger, more AI intensive thing like doing research or running these different background algorithms on research projects? This podcast was brought to you by Cherry Health, the healthcare jobs network with over 35,000 jobs across Canada and the US. Physicians, nurses, pharmacists, and all other healthcare professionals can sign up for free. Start connecting, messaging with colleagues, or checking out job opportunities posted by thousands of employers across North America. With dozens of healthcare-specific job filters and search options, we make it easy to advance your career, find your dream job, or line up your next locum with thousands of new jobs posted every week. www.cherry.health to get connected today.
So when it comes to costs and compute, there's different ways of looking at AI. But if we start with the research one, when it comes to medical AI, training models, training them on imagery, studies, that takes up a lot of time, a lot of bandwidth, and a lot of compute power. What is that compute power? If you go to the traditionals out there and the larger players, one of the larger players charges about $6.50 for an H100. And an H100 is one of the latest and greatest cards. I know the new Blackwell chipset is coming out from NVIDIA. But before those are really fully in rotation, currently the big boy is the H100. You pay about $6.50 an hour for a card like that currently. That doesn't sound like a lot, but you have to keep in mind some of these model trainings take up months, if not up to 2-3 years. That really puts things in perspective. And we're not talking about one card at that point. We're looking at least 1,000 of these cards working simultaneously. So that's about $6,000 an hour. 6,500 if you want to be correct.
That adds up pretty quick then.
That adds up really quickly, especially if you're doing it for a month, if not a few years. But that's pure training of your AI, right? So that's something that not everybody out there does. That's purely focusing on research, training, retraining, optimizing, and all the fun stuff that comes with. That's costly. Period. There's no way around it. The only way around it is if you find providers that do it more, that make it more affordable for folks by utilizing technologies like we do, or by providing data centers that are in locations that have cheaper power, and other types of regulations that might impact price as well. If we come to generative AI, like the Chat GPTs of the world, the cost of it drops a lot. At that point, it becomes a scalable issue. Like, what type of AI am I doing? What's my demand? How many users do I have? What kind of generative AI am I doing? If it's purely the Chat GPTs where it's responding in text and it's purely consuming that LLM, those are more affordable when it comes to compute. You can then have to start looking at what type of model you're using. And I know we're going really nerdy here now, but basically what it means is every model has a limitation when it comes to memory. Memory-wise, most of the GPUs, even the GPUs in your computer right now, actually can run a lot of models for you. And folks don't always realize that. But purely for generative AI, you can get away with a regular consumer card. Of course, with the caveat that the model fits on that card. Then the problem, of course, becomes, well, how do you use it, the technology behind it? So ChatGPT kind of bridged that for everybody and made that a lot easier for everybody to utilize. But if you think about it, you can get away with like a 3060 with 12 gigs. You can do a lot of things with that. It's not going to be as fast, but it'll be able to do it. And even NVIDIA provides you software for that. Like, there's desktop models out there where you can literally download the software on your computer, on your Windows machine, and you can use it as is and use an LLM that they provide. And they actually provide, I think they provide Llama 3.1 now with their own flavor to it. And you can get a lot away with that. And it makes it a lot more affordable. But the problem now exists as well is that not everybody knows about it. Not everybody's comfortable with doing that type of work. And it's easy enough to go to ChatGPT and just ask questions, right? Like, and it's good in its answers. But we need to, what we try to figure out now is how do we make it affordable for those researchers as well? Because the more models we have, the more training that gets done, the more optimized these models get, the better the responses will be, the faster they will be, etc. And that's what we're fixing with trying to find more providers out there, bring a little bit more competitiveness in the market, which always drives the price down. And then, of course, NVIDIA is doing their part, and even AMD is doing their part with their Grok machines. At that point, we'll see more and more compute becoming available, and the price will start dropping at one point again as well, which ultimately for us medical folks out there, that's going to be a big push forward.
And so when you want to bring down that unit cost for compute, where do you actually do that at? Like, is that at the hardware level or the firmware or the software that's running on these, or more at like the models themselves and just, asking and putting the answers together more efficiently? How do you actually bring down that dollar sign?
The answer is yes, to all of them. So every aspect you just mentioned has its role to play, right? So NVIDIA has their role to play with their cards. They of course have their own research their own cost price when it comes to fabricating these cards for everybody to use. And then, of course, you have your providers themselves who have to procure the cards, install the cards, maintain the cards, manage the cards, all the personnel that comes with it. That all drives up that cost. So when then Flux comes around and we offer it, we basically offer it in a different type of way where we can offer all these different providers in one big marketplace. I don't want to call it a marketplace. It's more like an offering. We basically allow folks to say, okay, this is our cost. This is our bare minimum. We take a little bit of margin so we can stay in business, which of course everybody has to be in business. We drive that price down that way because currently what happened is because of the larger providers out there kind of having a monopoly for the longest, they were able to set the price however they like. And then we're not even talking costs like egress and ingress to send all the data to these providers to then start training all your models on. It becomes a costly endeavor. So we don't charge egress or ingress if we can. Depending, of course, sometimes some providers have to, basically purely because of their internet capabilities. But most folks out there, we try to not do all of that. So no egress, no ingress. So that cost already drops. And then, of course, with competitiveness, the price of the compute power itself drops. And then lastly, the software, and then, of course, the hardware kernels and all that. If we provide the software in such a way that you don't have to train IT personnel to actually have it to set up, that by itself is also a cost reduction in itself. And to give you an idea, to set up a proper cluster, you need to have somebody who knows Kubernetes or Docker experience. Those are skill sets that are very common in IT these days, but still not everybody out there is very comfortable with that technology. So you have to be able to utilize that, set up clusters, be in the known of all the intricacies when it comes to the NVIDIA toolkits and all that you need to set up. Add in the software to run everything. So you might need some guys who know Python or Jupyter Notebook to help set it up. So all of those things become a burden as well on every organization out there. So with Influx, what we did is we basically took that away and we said, hey, you focus on what you need to focus on, which is your research. And you say, okay, I want to have 1,000 cards, a couple of clicks in the software, you launch your network, and you say, okay, I want to have a Jupyter Notebook so I can run my scripts on it. Sure, launch Jupyter Notebook, and now you're off to the races. So we took away a lot of these extra hurdles to help folks with purely focusing on what they need. And then last but not least, the generative AI itself. If you're not comfortable with the ChatGPT, especially in the healthcare environment, we have to be a little bit more careful if we use ChatGPT. Purely because if we accidentally upload a report or something, you want to analyze a study, but there's patient data, for instance, in it, and you're not aware. Let's assume we're playing innocent here. You're not aware that there's patient data in it. You're actually uploading that data to an American company at that point, and that data might be that will be utilized for training without the consent of that patient at that point. So what we're trying to do now as well is teach folks how to utilize their own ChatGPT, an open source version of it, so that they can run that on their own prem, on their own data storage. At that point, we stay within the protected hospital or clinic or healthcare providers software at that point, and then we're good to go. And again, we drop that cost down by providing open source software, and again by offering our services to help set these things up. So there's a lot of
very multi-pronged answer.
Yeah, it's not an easy answer. Like, how do you drive costs down? There's so many facets out there that play into the cost of AI.
Well, especially healthcare, like you mentioned, like industries that aren't necessarily restricted by patient health information data laws and being able to just like send the compute over to where energy is cheaper. Suddenly now you have this much more regionally restrictive problem needing to be figured out.
Yeah, and it is an issue. It is something sometimes quite daunting to tackle. And in Canada, you're sometimes even restricted per province on certain types of data. I know BC has their own laws where you're not even allowed somebody from another province to dial into your system and such. So it becomes an issue sometimes where we put up a lot of roadblocks to protect the patient. Don't get me wrong, that is important. But sometimes we make it a lot harder on ourselves sometimes than it really has to be. But you're right. Like we have to make sure we do the right thing, and we have to make sure that data stays where it has to stay and in protection of the patient.
Are there any common themes or trends you're seeing in the industry of how healthcare is utilizing AI?
Yeah, and healthcare even healthcare is such an interesting world to live in. Sometimes we're very, very proactive when it comes to technology, and we're very reactive to technology at the same time. I don't know how it works, but sometimes we have these brilliant moments where we push forward on a certain type of technology, and at the same time we put the brakes on it and we stop. AI is a
It is a
perfect
little
example of that.
bipolar that way.
It's very bipolar. Medical technology is always very bipolar. There's the FDA regulations that come in play, and in Canada we have our own. I forgot the name now, and they kind of sometimes form a roadblock. They have to because they have to make sure the software does what it does, but it also prevents AI from really taking off in the medical field. And you might be wondering like why? I see it all over. No, not really. Like the really true cutting edge AI, we don't see that just yet because we're facing roadblocks with the FDA approvals in the US, for instance. A big hurdle that I've hear a lot of AI folks talk about, vendors of pure AI software. Their biggest hurdle is that as soon as they release a software, they are stuck with that version. So they cannot train the model as they go. So let's say you have a doctor, I'm a radiologist in radiology IT, but I have a doctor reading a study and the software says, this is wrong. And the doctor was like, no, that's not wrong. That's an artifact, for instance, on a bad image. Being able to train the software at that point with that input, it's not allowed. So we can't on the fly teach the system. And those are type of things that sometimes are very blocking us from really making an advancement. On the other hand, we have our own, the doctors themselves being skeptical, and they should be. But we have doctors who are saying, no, this is really good. We need to start using it. And then you have the doctors saying, no, let's be cautious here. Let's not use that, or I don't trust it. It's a bit of a mixed bag sometimes on how we advance these things. And I saw that with the company I worked for in Alberta. We had you had three camps, the ones who were like, don't care, just I do my thing every day. And then you had the doctor, I want to really start using it. And then the doctor's like, no, absolutely not. This we should not try that. It's fun. It makes it interesting sometimes, the conversations I have with different doctors.
Well, I think you raise a good point, right? Like culturally in medicine, it's just not like a very fertile ground for innovation to spring from. Like most people come from a background of like biology, chemistry, or just in essence, science, where the whole premise is to be skeptical and question things until you've been shown otherwise. And that really permeates into the culture. And then when it like kind of trickles down into patient care of, okay, am I just being marketed a gimmick here that's, okay, they have the highest ad budget, this particular company or device or intervention, versus how much does this thing that I'm looking at actually improve patient care? Or is it actually, at the detriment of my patient? And then I think that's a huge part of how we wind up just in sort of such a backwards position in terms of technological advancements in healthcare. It's just not a great place to be seeing early adoption.
Well, and add on top of that sometimes cost, right? So in Canada, we're kind of tight when it comes to our provincial governments and making the willingness to advance certain things, if there's budget for it or not. So there's that. And in the US, it's a different story with the way they operate their private health. But there's definitely an influence on the cost itself for certain things as well, and that combine that with, like you said, sometimes the skepticism of is this really going to help me? If there's a cost to it, people will say, okay, let's hold off for now. Let's hold off. Let's see if somebody else does it first and see if they see any bad things or any concerns or whatever they have with the software there, and then we'll assess. So yeah, like you said, it's often medical. The medical field is a really good microcosm of what the real world looks like on adoption of technology. I really see that a lot. You have your early adopters who are really keen, and often, like you say, they have more of a background in IT, and more of the informatics type of background compared to those who have, like say, a more scientific background. They're a little bit more skeptical on the usage. Yeah, you're not wrong there.
And then when it comes to, I guess, sort of AI in healthcare in general, it definitely just regulatory wise is very challenging because, like you mentioned, you get approved and then suddenly the version is frozen in time, right? Until you've gone through the whole, rigorous process of having the version 1.1 analyzed and tested out to meet those same criteria. Like, do other industries that are trying to get more technology and AI in them, do they just sort of accept a higher error rate or more bugs or security issues? Is that really what it comes down to? It's just healthcare, that bar is so high?
The bar is high, but it's for good reasons, right? It's pure patient care. So that level makes our industry a lot more demanding. But AI in agriculture, for instance, they're going to utilize it a lot easier because it's not as big of a consequence if, I don't know, if one particular grain is not picked over another one. Maybe production or the yield might be a little lower in one way or another, but it doesn't affect the person straight away. When it comes to finance, the finance industry, they're going to be probably very picky because then the dollar signs are affected. But depending on the sector, you're not wrong. There might be more interested in getting a leg up over somebody else in their competition of somebody else. But when it comes to medical, we're a lot more cautious. Again, with patient care in mind, it totally makes sense. Point in case. During COVID and after COVID, a lot of AI was created to help with speeding up the process of reading all of those x-rays that were taken. And there was software created that helped with putting that in to help detect, okay, this is potentially COVID, this is potentially just nothing, or there might be something else going on. And there was some really good software developed for that. The problem is that I don't think many people really installed it at one point because people were just too cautious. And this was a fast moving situation we were in, that we had to move fast, and still there was hesitance to really put it in and not to affect the day-to-day reading of doctors. But I do know some folks did put it in, and it helped them, for instance, triage some patients, say, okay, these are the studies we definitely need to look at first, make sure that this is all good. And then it basically helped with more prioritizing the reading of certain studies compared to basically diagnosing somebody straight away. I don't think anybody out there in the medical field is directly diagnosing anything purely based on AI. There's always that human factor still in play. Unless
what about radiology?
You know something that I don't know yet.
Isn't the radiology like one of the early adopter sides of healthcare? Like I've heard years ago that here in Alberta, at least, like the majority of mammograms were being read by computer scans, and then a human comes along and signs off on it. But it seems like that was the first place that we were really starting to see computer assistants take over that diagnostic role.
Mammography is a really good example of that, right? It's there's a lot of studies available, so there's a lot of research that you can do on them. There's a lot of availability. It's very streamlined when it comes to it. It's always the same type of imaging, and then you have, of course, mammography with implants or without implants. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of software developed already, and now we call it AI, but back then we would just call it a tool. We just call it tools at that point. But it basically was already AI. You're absolutely right. And mammography is one of the branches within radiology who really make a lot of progress there. And with good riddance too, because it helps the doctors a lot. And there's Volpera, I think is a big software provider that does a lot of it. Volpera scores is very common in radiology. That helps drive up diagnosis, helps with pinpointing the studies that we have to look at right away. So yeah, there's a lot of advancements are made in radiology, but let's be honest, pathology is right there with them. There's a lot of imagery being done where AI is helping, and that goes with ultrasounds, that goes with X-rays, that goes with CTs. To the point even now that you see AI within the machines themselves, like MRIs, for instance. I'm not a doctor, just full disclosure. I am not a doctor. I look at an image and I'm like, I don't see what you see, doctor, but to me, it's a gray mass. Good or bad, I don't know. But I was at RSNA, I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago, and it was an MRI machine, and they had AI now implemented to enhance the imagery. I think it was GE who came with that. And it looked like I was watching a 4K movie at that point. It was so clear that I was like, okay, I see there's something that I don't think that belongs there. So yeah, like we're moving fast with technology, and the next few years are going to be very interesting to see how that all evolves.
It's interesting that the AI is now actually like manipulating the images to be more contrasting between signal to the noise. I wonder if that's going to start trickling down into other areas. I'm picturing like the electronic stethoscopes where the volume of the heartbeat is, amplified. Maybe they'll start picking out the murmur itself that you're listening to make it a little bit more apparent, or other such things like that. I think that's pretty cool.
It's there. I think Philips something created like that already. They were showcasing.
Oh, that's a thing. Okay.
Yeah, so there's definitely progress being made in that as well. And Philips is pretty familiar, known for their ultrasound machinery, and they already have AI implemented there as well, and with enhancing again imagery, but also sound, and helping with EKGs and even identifying patterns. And all of that, it's coming, and it's coming faster. How often I get a question from my kids as well, or family, and they're like, "How do you see AI evolving within the medical field?" And I say, "Look, I hate to say it, but I like Star Trek, and in Star Trek, all the little gadgets that we saw in Star Trek back in the '90s. Yes, I'm that old. We see that now coming to fruition, right? Your phone, the communication device back then, but also you're starting to see that now in the medical field where they put you on a bed and hook you up on things, and AI is already helping you with finding things. It doesn't mean it's a diagnosis, but it helps you find. It's a tool to help you go forward. And we're getting close to that point now where you're just scanning people and they'll help figure out what's going on. It's a pipe dream, but it's coming fast.
Well, I mean, when you look at all the individual components of the job that I do, like you can start to see AI actually coming in and playing a role kind of along the entire spectrum. Like you've got these artificially intelligent patient engagement tools that are sending out like a history intake questionnaire and like changing it dynamically, and patients are filling these in before they even get there, right? So like the actual information gathering process, computers are now starting to like get involved in the process. When it comes to the actual diagnosis, I mean, there's been computer programs around since I was in med school over 10 years ago where you would type in the symptoms and it would start giving you your like scores of likelihoods of different disease pathology being present. It's part of the imaging now, like the scans that we're getting, it's analyzing those. And then at the same time on the output, like, okay, we know what the disease is. How do we start just connecting you with the repositories of information on treatment options? And so I don't know.
You're saying it. Yeah.
And so there's no like one, there's no magic machine like the doctor bot yet, but like it is definitely present pretty much along the whole spectrum, other than even like the physical aspect of like what you do mechanically with your hands. There's still like, we don't have robots all over the place yet. Even then, there's still some robots in like the surgical operating rooms and things like that. So it is coming.
The craziest robots that I've seen, and I'm talking 15 years ago, was in France when I was working for ACFA. I was at a brand spanking new hospital, and they had these robots, and now you see them at Amazon and everywhere, but they had these little robots that would literally drive under a bed and then lift up the bed and then bring the patient to its position where it had to be. I was flabbergasted when I saw that, and that was like 15 years ago. So I wonder, but that's France, so they do things a little different than everybody else, I guess. But it was pretty cool to see. But you're not wrong. Like, and day to day, like if I have to go to a doctor here in Manitoba, often enough, I might get a text message, fill in this questionnaire already, and the doctor has all the things in it. And I can see that at one point where, based on the answers you've given, or you know, like my blood pressure is this morning, and we record it every day, and then based on the pattern that the detects, okay, there might be a need to maybe give him something for his blood pressure, something like that. Like you will see that happening. But what the biggest thing with AI for me personally, what I like about AI is that it brings back the doctor itself being able to be the doctor. Like you're not just collecting the data now to help you with your diagnosis. The data has been collected for you. It's been processed to a certain degree and then given to you, you as a doctor to help you with your diagnosis, guiding you to a certain thing. You don't have to agree with it, and you'll be able to find the pieces that might not be correct for you, but it allows you to be the doctor again and focus on the patient. I think that's where AI really is helping shine a lot of folks out there. And definitely in the radiology world, after COVID, there was a lot of what the doctors, well, my doctors at that point called radiology fatigue. There were so many X-rays that to be read, pressure on everybody in the medical field, that I think AI helped in that regard as well by prioritizing patients, by helping pre-diagnose certain things, scoring. We see that with mammo, that's the thing already, but we saw that now happening in CTs. We see that happening in X-rays. I think a lot of that is helping doctors move forward, and I think that's the most fun thing I see about it. Yeah.
What would be like the number one most common misconception you see when people are talking about AI or perhaps AI in healthcare?
Well, I think the biggest conception is that people are scared that AI is going to diagnose them at one point. I don't think that's in the cards anytime soon. I don't think any doctor is willing to hand over that process. I know there's a lot of radiologists out there that are scared that AI is going to take over their job. No, I don't think that's the case. I think what it allows us to do is to do even more studies now on patients to get to the bottom of things faster, and we focus on the actual diagnosis, on helping them read. I don't think it's going to go as far as that the AI is going to be doing your diagnosis. We're not
Why
talking
not?
about self-driving. We're not talking about
Like from my
self-driving cars here.
perspective, that seems like the obvious thing that the system is going to be pushing towards. Like doctors themselves are like one of the biggest line items on the budget for healthcare. And when you look at like
I know.
medical textbooks, it's like algorithm driven and protocols. Like other than the actual like human element and like the patient rapport and then the physical manipulation in 3D space, like I almost feel like the AI can do a lot of what I do on the daily basis. And then when you give it Scarlett Johansson's voice, I bet a lot of my patients would pick that over me at some point down the road here.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, doctor. I would rather go to Scarlett's practice too, and compared to yours. But no, I don't think that at the end of the day, there's always a doctor who has to sign off on it. And who's going to be that responsible person if let's say we go full utopia and we say no more doctors. There's no more need for doctors. We're going to stick to the one thing. And one of the things that we're dealing with is biology, right? This is not a written thing. Biology morphs, biology evolves, and point in case, new viruses and all that. If we keep AI as is, and AI can learn a lot of things, and AI can evolve with it, but it'll just flag it as an anomaly, and or it might misdiagnose it altogether because it's trying to fit it in a certain bracket. A doctor will say, I haven't seen that before. That's not normal. Not every doctor will pick up on it. We're all humans. We all miss things. But our human brain is still a lot faster than an AI. AI is trained. AI is following patterns. It's following, or when a pattern isn't followed, that's the things that AI follows. At the end of the day, it's 1 and 0. It's not a human. And that's the piece that we can't forget. It's a big tool, and it helps us, and it helps everybody out there. It helps me in my day-to-day, with my emails. Man, my emails have never been as greatly written these days than they ever were. But at the same time, when I get an email from somebody, I'm like, okay, you did a good job, ChatGPT. I know that guy didn't write that email like that. It's the human factor is still something we cannot disclose. AI will get us 99% of the way. At 1%, that's the human factor. That's still something that you and I have to.
So actually,
not me. I'm not the doctor.
Makes me.
You are.
I want to ask you, so the professional business part of you, obviously very like tech and AI focused. How have you personally adopted AI? Like, where has it actually changed around your workflow in terms of just managing, like you mentioned, your emails and like having things look a lot more well written now? Like, where else are you actually using AI as an AI expert in your own life?
Well, we call it AI now, but in my entire career, I've always been writing scripts and codes to help me analyze things, right? So one of the things that I did for ECFA at one point was when you saw me show up at your hospital, that was not a good sign. That something was wrong, either with the software we had or with the infrastructure. And so what I did at that point was create scripts to help me analyze network or databases that might have been having issues, or I analyzed a million records of something. All of that was done with scripting. So for me, it's not that new AI. What makes it new now for me is that everybody has access to that. So, and to the point that, hey, I need a website created. Well, I can go to a website designer and have him write the script, or, hey, Flux AI, can you create me a quick script to make this website? It has to do this, this, and this, and I'm up and running 5 minutes later. So for me, and the same in the medical field, AI is making me more efficient. Some people would say more lazy, but that's not a bad thing.
Work
like if
smarter,
I have more
not
time,
harder.
Exactly. So if I can do more things and focus on what I need to be doing instead of writing my emails and all that, and I can say, hey, this is the data, write my emails for me and ship it off, I'll take it. Why not? It opens me to having more personal meetings, in an interview like this, or having a conversation with other folks in the space. Everything that helps me make myself more efficient and more time efficient, I'll take it. And AI has been really the case for me. What I had to get used to, though, with AI was, and I think that's for a lot of folks out there, is how good it actually already is when it comes to responding. And when you talk to support on somebody's website, you're not talking to a person, you're talking to an AI, and it's really good at finding the solution. I love it. I personally love it. I went through a similar evolution back in the early 2000s with Google, when we all of a sudden had Google available to us and we were able to find things more easily compared to, what was it back in the day? I think I used Yahoo and Alta Vista or something. And maybe you found something that was somewhat relatable to what you were looking for. But Google was that process back then, and now AI is that next step in the evolution and going forward.
It is surprisingly good at that problem solving. Like, I personally, there's been a few like just interpersonal conflicts that have popped up, like little family drama things. Like somebody got invited to Thanksgiving, which pissed somebody else off, and I was like, I don't really have a great answer on this one. Like, I could see why both people might be a little upset here. There's been like more than one occasion where I've like went and popped it into ChatGPT just to see what it advises, and it's usually actually come up with pretty solid advice each time. Dinner. Yeah, literally. Yeah. And it's just like, it's very interesting how it like takes a very kind of rational, logical approach to things. And it's like, oh, okay, I hadn't considered that. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah. And coming back to my Star Trek analogies, I feel like I'm talking to Spock at times. Like it has a snarkiness sometimes in its answers. Or if you ask it something and it's actually a dumb question, it kind of gives that snarky response sometimes. I love that it does that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I personally haven't done it for family emergencies, but I'm kind of curious now what to say at the
Try it next
Thanksgiving dinner
time.
for all the right, because I know with Christmas and all that coming, there's a lot of family dinners or friend dinners, and for some of us, yeah, some interesting conversations. One of the
So
fun
yeah,
things
not
that
just tech support.
no, but what my kids are very heavy in what is it, D&D. I never got into any of that, but they love it at D&D. And so they've been using Flux AI, and that's our own chat GPT. And so my oldest, uses it every Saturday. And so they basically give it some parameters and then say, hey, create me a D&D story with these parameters. And then off they go. And basically, instead of having a dungeon keeper or something, what they call it, they use the AI as the dungeon keeper. And then basically they give the responses and the dice results and all that back to the AI, and AI is just dragging them along through the conversation. And then the extra flavor to it as well is that they add imagery. So then, like, okay, this is the scene, and then they push the button and say, "Hey, create me an image of it." They're like, for them, it's more immersive. Um, uh, yeah, their D&D is not just a table game with the guy talking about it. It now becomes more tangible, and that's a day-to-day thing, but I love that the kids are embracing it. I never thought about it, but yeah, there they go.
Yeah, the additional use cases just continue to pop up. What do you think for healthcare going forwards in terms of the workflow, in terms of the administrative support side of things? Like, is the innovation going to have to come from the EMR vendors themselves because they're sort of the broker and the holder of all the data and all the information? Or is there going to be ways that people can incorporate AI that aren't kind of hamstrung by being part of that central software system?
That's a good question. You're not wrong. The EMRs are going to be definitely a gatekeeper to some of these things, and not to hold back on AI. They're going to present all the tools out there. I think it's going to be individual doctors still. That's often what I've seen in all the hospitals that I've been in North America and the rest of the world. It's always a doctor who pushes on something going forward, and then the EMR follows. I don't think EMRs themselves are really going to push forward to AI. Reason being is that the more bells and whistles we add to a system, the more complicated it gets, the more harder it gets to support. So they're going to always hold back. They're going to provide it if you want it, but they're never going to push for it. I think that's still the individual doctor moving forward. That's a personal
When it comes to
opinion,
the
though.
individual doctor, like they're thinking about doing it, like what should they actually be evaluating in terms of security and in terms of privacy? Like when it comes to just an average Joe who's not an AI expert, like how do you actually approach it in a
They can always
safe
call me.
manner?
They,
Okay,
like I said, they
come
can
on
always
down.
call me and I can help figure that out. But no, when you see as a doctor, when you see something that's interesting for you, always ask for a trial. A lot of the vendors out there do provide you with trials, and those EMR platforms themselves, their marketplaces often come with something like that where you can trial it and see how it goes. Validate the data. Right? So let's say you're doing something with X-rays, and it has to find something. Push a couple studies where you know something is there and see if it does detect it, and then some studies that you know there's nothing, push them through it as well and see if it detects something or not. So validating yourself, right? So it's like driving a car. It's not because you like a car and it looks fancy and it has all the bells and whistles that's the car you're going to purchase at the end of the day. You want to test drive it. You want to make sure that it's up to your liking. And if not, no harm done. Let's move on and find the next one. The positive thing about medical AI at this point, and I'll be at RSNA in a few weeks, there's an entire floor now dedicated to AI. There's so many tools out there now, so you can actually window shop a little, find a tool you like, and find a tool that adds to your efficiency, not just add tools to get more scores, because that's going to be the next problem that we're going to have is that we're going to have so many tools all coming with their own metrics behind it, saying this is flagged, this is not flagged, this is high priority, medium priority. At one point, we're going to have an AI go through the AI results. So we're going to have to be a little bit cautious on what we put in. So I would say window shop, find a tool you like, test it out, and validate it, and then go over and push for implementing it. When it comes to security and data protection, those are really good points, and those are questions you need to ask at the start of that journey anyways. Where do you store the data? Am I uploading it to a cloud? Am I keeping that data on-prem? Because a lot of folks out there don't realize when they install some of these marketplace softwares, it often is a upload software they download. You connect to a central server, do the processing there, and then get the result back. You might be at breach at that point with some of their local regulations. So you might want to make sure you ask the right questions in that case. So,
and is it as simple as that of like, where does the data live and where does it pass through? Because I feel like this is probably, the skepticism when it comes to the security and the privacy side of things. It's probably one of the biggest barriers to that adoption is, the innovation is coming from companies that have only been around for, a blink in time, comparatively speaking, to most of the computer systems or Oracle or, TELUS provided stuff that we're using. And so there's these smaller companies that just don't have that brand name and that like basically just soak time and market presence. Like, how do you start getting more confident that a company is in fact reputable? Data storage and where does it go? Like, what else would you look for?
The questions I ask when I'll be going to RSNA, I'll be asking similar questions, not from a doctor stance, but just purely to educate myself. So, like I said, is the software running locally? What is it gathering? Are you uploading it somewhere? If you're uploading it, where are you uploading it? Is that something I have access to or not? If I don't have access to it, okay, that's fine. But are we doing anything with anonymization, for instance, or not at all? Am I responsible for it? Are you taking care of it? Have you worked with any other hospitals already? Is it FDA cleared? Often enough, the answer will be no. No, we have not had our FDA clearance yet. Okay, at that point, you can't even use it for diagnosis purposes. Now you have to use it as a test case. You can still go forward with it, but you can't actually use it with true patient data yet. Or, well, certain countries you can, certain countries you can't, depending where you are, or certain states even. But you have to be very, very vocal and make sure you ask a lot of questions. And in the end, ask for references. What doctor have you worked with? Is there any doctors been involved or not? What kind of what did you guys do before this software? Because I've talked with guys who straight out of college had a great idea, met the school, and build it out. Sometimes it's a good software too, but they might not always realize some of the intricacies that comes with the data itself and the patient safety that comes with it. Especially if it's young guys, they're more focused on the result, and often enough it's a good software, but there might be pieces that they might not be aware of. So I know a lot of the EMRs out there and the marketplaces that they offer that they do some of that due diligence, but still be able to try it. If there's no trials, that's a red flag in my book. If they're not willing to have you try it out and see how it goes. Those are the questions I would be asking. Where do you store it?
Okay.
How do you process it?
Okay, that's the big ones. Well, I guess before we wrap up here, any final thoughts on the future of AI in healthcare? Anything else big and exciting you're looking forward to or wary of?
Yeah. Get familiar with it. It's not gonna. It's coming. It's coming, and it's gonna come fast. And it's definitely gonna help us all, regardless. Will it make mistakes along the way? Absolutely. That's why we still have the doctors in place to help sign off on it. And I'm looking forward to the bells, the tools and the bells and whistles that are being created as we go. I see priority filtering as the main one for now. For me, myself, I'm hoping that my contribution with the compute power will help find solutions to everyday patient care, and I hope that that's going to be going forward. Just going to amplify what we're doing here. So AI is here. AI is here to stay, and it's only going to get better.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join me this afternoon. Davy Wittock, Chief Business Officer for Influx Technologies. Thanks again for taking the time this afternoon. Thank you for joining us this week on Leaders in Healthcare. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment. And if you found this episode helpful, don't forget to share it with your network.